second, yeah. Possibly. There we go. Okay, the usual note well. Okay, so here's our agenda. We have a very full agenda. We're going to talk about the FFV1 Matroska, the GeoJSON, location source parameter, via header field parameter. We're going to spend a little bit of time on the SLIM charter, and then we're going to talk about 5 minutes for there's a new proposed working group. Okay, and then just to highlight a couple other topics that don't have agenda time. Alan submitted this document on opportunistic approach for SRTP. There's been a little bit of discussion, so people should continue that. Michael Proctor had put this document out, the automatic discovery, and there was a little bit of discussion, but there has been like zero discussion in the past 4 or 5 months. Yeah, Ari, yeah?
Arikiran Eriksson, I earlier asked if the ICE discussion could be in the beginning of the
It's at the end. Do you want?
I mean,
it's at the end of the agenda.
Okay, so are you gonna? I mean, then I could go right now the other session and come back.
That's fine. Yeah, yeah. Well, it'll be at the end. Yeah.
Okay, you gotta be strict on that time. So I know
if we are done early with other things, we're going to do it. We're not going to do it exactly at 11:25. It's possible we will, right?
Okay. I'll follow you on Jabber.
Okay.
Okay. So being there when you're going. Thanks.
We will make sure that we put the Jabber as we switch, we put it in Jabber. Yeah.
Well, can I?
I mean, do you guys want to bash it just to put it right now? Is there any problem?
We are bashing. Yeah.
Okay.
We'd like to do it now.
Well,
is that
it would have been nice if the ADs had told me that, because I would have arranged things properly, but no worries at all. No worries at all. So then there's also the P header for charging. I don't know if Dan York's in here or not, but anyways, that's been discussed on the list. People should still discuss it. IETF 94 deadlines, starts 8 weeks from Monday.
You're okay with this change? Okay, so there has been a proposal to.
Well, I've got slides.
You have slides. Okay.
Okay, so are you going to? Who was going to talk to these slides? Okay, you people that want to talk about it, somebody get up here and talk about it, please.
Yeah, so there's interest in forming a new ICE working group spin-off of the work done in music. The reason is there's a new interest in ICE due to the WebRTC usage, and the problems are better understood. So there's, or we need more eyes on ICE, especially from the transport area. So having a separate working group might help mitigate that. Yeah. And we really want to move all the irrelevant ICE documents out of MMusic and form a new working group out of that. And in essence, I think MMusic already works like that, because MMusic usually have 2 sessions, one with SDP and one with ICE. So there wouldn't be a huge change in how we actually do things. Okay, next slide, I think. Yeah, that was the motivation.
Well, that's what you said, okay.
Yeah. So hopefully we'll get more synergies, more people interested in ICE and helping out, and that's the main motivation.
So anybody have comments on this or like to?
Well, okay.
So Fleming Andreas and their music coach here. I guess, I mean, we've had some discussions offline, of course, right? There's a lot of advantages to it. The one thing that I think we need to be clear about is that there is core ICE work, right? And then there is ICE SDP work. And where do we draw that line, and where does what get done, right? We need to get some clarity around that. That would be my only concern.
I agree.
Mark's not in the room, is he? So Mark had sent out some proposed charter text, and I thought he sent it to dispatch, but he didn't. So that's my mistake for not catching that. So there is some floating around. In answer, one comment I was going to make on I'm sorry, Ben Campbell. A comment I was going to make on the SDP question is we have precedent where we have other working groups like Payload that have generally minor SDP things, and they do it in their own group. It makes sense to me. I think that ICE would handle ICE-specific SDP things in the ICE group if we have one, unless they are sufficiently complex to actually need music to work on, and we would have to handle that on a case-by-case basis to make that decision.
Yeah, I think you're right. But once you start touching offer answer and things like that, then probably music is the place to discuss.
And I suppose that's more common for ICE than it is for the Payload thing. So.
So that is the proposed charter text that was sent to the ICE mailing list. Yep.
Yeah, well. So regarding the charter, we probably need more text regarding cooperation with other working groups like MIF or Stack Evo and things like that. But that's a good discussion to have on the ICE mailing list, I think.
We've heard very little input on this. Does ADs want to say anything? Does anyone else want to say anything here?
Well, the problem is the charter didn't go to the mailing list or anything, so it's...
Yeah, so we should get this out to dispatch and to the ICE list. It's already on the ICE list. Okay, but it should go out to dispatch too, I think, since ICE is very new. I think we've had a lot of side hallway conversations about this, and so I guess my question is if anyone is opposed to, continuing to discuss charter text, and the other implication would be a recharter for music to take the ICE stuff out and be clear about the separation between the two. So I would be interested to hear if people are opposed to pursuing those two things.
No,
we'll send it to the list.
Yeah, well, only about 10 people were fully aware of this. Okay, we're out of time for that topic, so let's move on.
Okay. One really quick bit. So also in the M-Music Friday session, we have a slot to discuss this issue. Okay. Because of course not everyone interested on the issue is here. So M-Music on the Friday is going to be spending some 10-15 minutes from the beginning of the session on this topic.
Okay, now we're back to our regularly scheduled programming here.
Hi, I'm Tessa Fallon. I'm here to talk about a proposal for the standardization of the specifications for FFV1 and Matryoshka. I'm here with Emmanuel, and Emmanuel's works for Packard and is part of their Performa project. Emmanuel's just going to say a little bit about the Performa project and where the impetus to bring FFV1 and Matryoshka to the IETF came from before we get into more details.
Hello. So Performa is a project co-funded by the European Commission to address the need for further design and development tools to assist the archivists and conservators in assessing, controlling, and fixing certain key long-term preservation digital formats. The objective of Performa is to develop and deploy an open source licensed software, reference implementation for file format standards, aimed at memory institution and organization carrying preservation tasks, wishing to check conformance with a specific standard. The media area team, represented by Tessa and Jerome here, was selected as a supplier to work on providing these tools specifically for the lossless video codec FFV1 and the audiovisual container Matroska. The Preforma project is committed to have an open source approach, as each of the Preforma project is mandated to use open licenses through the project on documentation, test files, and code. These requirements help to ensure that key pieces of information about the outcome of Preforma do not get trapped behind paywalls or within proprietary code, which is very important also for the preservation community. The fact that FFV1 and Matroska are open source format, not standardized through an international standardization body such as SMTPE, for instance, has led these formats to suffer from some kind of lack of credibility and to be labeled as unstable and unprofessional within a part of the audiovisual archiving and broadcast community. So having these two formats standardized through IETF would give further credit to these two formats and encourage their use by memory institution. And because of the Preforma requires the documentation to be made available openly and freely, IETF seems the most suitable standardization body or organization to do this work.
So with Jerome Martinez, who is also here, he's the lead developer of Media Info. If we could go to the next slide. Okay. We've been working to improve these specifications for FFV1 and Matroska. And just very quickly, FFV1 is a lossless interframe codec. It's currently maintained by the FFmpeg project under the leadership of Michael Nirmeyer. Matroska is an extensible media container found in MKV files and others, and the basis for WebM files, and it's maintained by matroska.org. So you can find the current work on the FFV1 specification on the links here, and I believe these slides will be provided to everybody through the... Oh, they're already uploaded. Okay, great. So most of the development work being done on FFV1 is on the FFmpeg development list, and the GitHub repositories for FFV1 and the related work can be found there. Most recently, the FFV1 specification has been converted from LAX to Markdown. Sorry, I misspoke. Right, so if there's more information there. If you could go to the next slide. For Matroska, the specifications are available there. The development is taking place and discussed on the Matroska list, the following list there. And the information about the GitHub repositories can be found there as well. Okay, so the objectives for bringing this to the IETF are to improve the sustainability factors for both formats, including disclosure, credibility, and transparency, to create a mechanism to clarify authoritatively the intent of the specifications, ensuring that complete, authoritative, open, and accessible documentation is available. I'm sorry. I think we have the wrong slides. I think. So actually, if you have the charter. Oh, okay. Sorry. Yep. No. Yes. There we go. Okay. Okay. So sorry about that. So we put together a charter. We haven't sent it out to the mailing list yet, but what we're really interested in doing is hearing from members of the IETF and from this working group in particular about the possibility for work on these specifications. So I can give you a minute to read this. I'm sorry I didn't send it out beforehand. Sorry.
This is Ben Campbell. Just to the room, let's not, I think the thing to talk about here is whether this is interesting work for the IETF, not whether this charter text is correct. If it is interesting work, then we will, I'm talking to the people who may come to the mic in a minute or not.
Okay.
Right.
more than I am used.
Yeah, right.
Because if we do the work, we'll need to do quite a bit of work around getting the charter text to talk about what we're really going to do, as opposed to just talking about what Performa is.
Okay.
But I'm actually more interested to hear whether people think this is something the IETF should be involved in.
Well, and we were going to get to that, but yeah. So, I mean, this is the thing. So this charter isn't ready to ship to you and Alyssa to move forward. This is just to start that dialogue. So, right.
So, I mean, I guess that does lead to the question. I mean, is the work on the specifications for FFE1 and Matryoshka of interest to members of the IETF? And if there are questions surrounding that, I would love to.
I mean, there were a number of people on the mailing list that said, yeah, this looks interesting. So I'm wondering where those people are. Okay, I think some of them are in the room, so it would be.
Could you speak for a moment, this is Robert Sparks, could you speak for a moment to what is it about this that is internet-centric? So,
what is it about this, about FFE1 and Matryoshka?
Sure. Both as the codex and the storage format in aspects of it in particular. I mean, you might look at what we have going on in Opus as maybe this looks like that, but the codec working group in Opus was very specifically designed to focus on internet-oriented real-time applications. So is there anything in particular about this set of codecs that makes it like that, or is this just general codec work? And that will very strongly inform whether or not IETF is a good venue for doing the work.
Right. So I'm not the technical expert on Matryoshka, but I know Matryoshka is the basis for, perhaps Jerome could speak maybe if you want to speak more about this, for WebM.
Jérôme Martinez. About Matryoshka, this is the basis for WebM, and WebM is used with VP8 and VP9 by Google, for example. So Matryoshka is a lot used on the internet. If you look at, for example, YouTube, they sometimes use WebM, which is based on Matryoshka. So it would be good to specify really to have a really good specification of Matryoshka for having a good compatibility between all the browsers about WebM and Matryoshka. About FFV1, it is it is not completely internet-based, but it may be on the internet later, and we also like the openness of IETF, and we have the same goal. We want transparency, we want open source, we want to have openness. So we think that IETF has some common goal with us, and for that we would like to go through the IETF.
Alyssa Cooper, do you guys feel like these are a package deal? Like you do them both or we don't do either?
No, I don't think that's the case. I think the reason we think of them together is that if there's FFE1 and Matryoshka together, that would be, at least in terms of the audiovisual world, the only open source, truly open source codec and container available. But if there is interest in developing Matryoshka over FFE1, is that, I guess, the underlying implication? Or
I was just curious.
I mean, I think a lot of what we're asking here is for that, for the sort of feedback, from the IETF about, what type of work the IETF, would be interested in doing on both or on either of these.
Okay, thanks.
Ronnie Evan, I'm curious because when I read this, it looks like it's more like for storage. It's not for transporting the information or doing it over the internet. That's what I think was the question, I think that was before, and I didn't get it from the answer why you want it in the IETF. It's not.
Right. And I think maybe it was a mistake to have this up here, to begin with, or to introduce everybody to this particular topic, because I think it is worth discussing, why this would be appropriate for the IETF. I thought Jerome's answer, about Matryoshka, informed kind of why we were looking at the IETF. But in particular, the goals, to make these specifications open source,
So just to clarify, the intention is also to be able to transfer information over the internet using these formats, this codecs? What's the objective of standardizing those in the IETF?
The objective of standardizing these specifications within the IETF is to make these, the specifications that are currently available for these types of things are primarily proprietary. And the goal of this is to have these specifications that are currently under development be open source and standardized. Sorry, I'm not being very articulate in terms of my answer, but.
Jérôme Martinez. Matroska is supported already by a lot of browsers because it is used on the internet. And for example, Opus is standardized by IETF and can be transported within Matroska. Opus is good. It is an audio codec, but there is no container standardized by IETF for transporting it with for example, with video. So, okay, we use MP4, for example, on H.264 on the internet, but it may be great to have something more open, like what IETF used to standardize openness, no more royalties, for example. So, from our point of view, being able to send on the internet some format which are completely open source without any royalties and completely described would be better for the internet too. So yes, it is for storage on the main purpose, but it may also be used for transport on the internet. So Opus, for example, for the audio, and we need something for the video. And FFV1 may be a good candidate because it is open source. And Matroska is already used on the internet and it is open source too.
Relaying from the Jabber from Robux 4. Matroska is currently supported in Chrome, Firefox, and MS Edge for streaming video. Opus can also be stored in Matroska for streaming. And unlike MP4, Matroska was designed for streaming on networks, even live streams. And now from Dave Rice. The preservation of the video of the internet is long-term, a complex matter filled with codecs that they gain wide use and then gradually fall into obsolescence. The role of a lossless codec helps preserve internet video in some form that is long-lasting.
Ahmed Bouazizi. So I have two questions on the FFV1. I think we're talking about internet, maybe streaming and so on, and lossless codecs are usually not the right thing to do there. It's mostly like studio format, so SMPTE might be the right place for you to go and define that if you want. But
well, I think
for the internet, I slightly disagree. My other comment on Matroska, so if we take it here, so usually it's like a big effort of maintaining storage formats. Like I'm one of the guys who works on the MPEG, MP4, or ISO BMFF, and whenever there is like a new media codec, there is a lot of work to support its storage there and so on. I'm not sure about Matroska, but I guess there is a lot of maintenance work. So is the intention to move all of that work to the IETF, or does IETF take control over that format then, if we do it here, or does it stay as like an open source project out there?
Okay. Just to answer your first question really quickly, the reason we didn't take it to SMPTE is that the specifications with SMPTE are behind a paywall. And part of what we're trying to accomplish here is to have these be open source, so that they're available, without a fee.
From the Jabber chat room, almost exactly the same words from David Rice.
David Rice is working on the same project.
SMPTE standards are behind paywalls and lack the features of IETF that are most appealing, such as the openness and transparency of the process.
Jérôme Martinez, about lossless format. Currently, this is, on the internet, there are a lot of lossy formats, right? But we don't know what happens in 10 or 20 years. Maybe we want a lossless format in the future. So why why should we forbidden a lossless format on the internet right now if we can do, if we may use something in the future? And about Matroska, for the second question, we want to discuss with IETF about what is the best method for maintaining the format. We can maintain it, but if IETF wish to maintain something, or if we can do something together, it would be great.
This is Ben Campbell speaking mostly as an individual until we get to that point. Just a second. So one thought here is that one of the things you've talked about is coming to the IETF because we have an open process and have publicly available specifications. You don't need us to have a publicly available specification. Anybody can make a publicly available specification. The question really to me, sorry?
Just to clarify, by publicly available, are you suggesting you don't have to go through our process here to get something published? Or are you saying they can just put it out somewhere on the internet?
They can just put it out somewhere.
Okay, well, it is already somewhere.
Right. I mean, we are not the only place that one. Right. We're not the only place.
Well, and they already have. It's all already out there.
I understand that, but the idea that we're a platform for publishing without a paywall, there's lots of ways you can do that don't need the IETF. Where I'm going with that is, where the IETF might be able to help you with on technical aspects. And that's the more important thing the IETF can bring. And so my question along that line is, how far along is this work? Does it actually need the assistance of the IETF to get the technical work done?
Well, I'll speak to your first point, and that's absolutely right. And I'm sorry if I wasn't 100% clear about that, is that yes, these are already available on that thing called the web. They are all public, but where, the value, I think, as Ben pointed out, is that, is the IETF review process is making these not just, things that are out there, specifications that exist, but specifications that have been vetted and thoroughly reviewed by the IETF community. To the second point, there's been a lot of work done on both the FFV1 and Matroska specifications. So it's not so much that that we're looking to the IETF to develop these specifications. They exist. If you have access to the links that were provided in the slideshow, you can go to either the FFV1 or the Matroska specifications and see the current states of development. So I think it's more the IETF process and yes. All right. So the IETF process and review and the input from the IETF community, which would be of value to this project. The development communities for both FFV1 and Matroska are very active in furthering these specifications, but there isn't any sort of there isn't any sort of authoritative stamp on these specifications. And maybe stamp is the wrong word to use there because I know exactly what sort of questions will arise from that comment. So, forgive me. But the value of these specifications is being undermined by the fact that they aren't, specifications, with any sort of authority. And that they're being, they are being developed, but they would, really need to be thoroughly vetted by people who are interested in doing this work. And that's, I think, the other main point is that if people aren't interested in doing this type of work, that's valuable for us to, know, if this is not something that, IETF members would be interested in participating in, or, that would be good to know as well.
Okay. So the second part, and I'll go ahead and put my AD hat back on for this one,
sure,
is that if this comes into the IETF as a standards track effort, then the IETF would be taking change control.
Right.
And the IETF might change things. Is that okay?
I think, as far as I understand, that's what happens right within the IETF process. And I think what we want to do is have the current development communities involved, with the process. But if the IETF, in order to go through that process, right, the IETF would have change control and would need to change things. And I think that that would be understood if it goes further.
Okay.
So, thank you.
From the Jabber chat room from Dave Rice. Today we are well familiar with the role of FLAC lossless audio on the internet. There is a similar need for FFV1 for lossless video as well. Just as we have lossless documents, audio, and photos on the internet, there is a future for lossless video on the internet as well. And now Ted Hardy at the mic, not being the Jabber chat room for a second.
Sure.
To follow up on the point that Ben was making, yes, the IETF requires change control as part of bringing a document into the IETF standard track process. However, the IETF is this sort of nebulous thing that people think they're putting a document over into, when in fact it's more a process, and whoever turns up in this room is the IETF for the purposes of this discussion. Right. And if your development community isn't willing to start participating in the IETF process on the mailing list at the very least, then it will fail for lack of kind of continuity, if nothing else. So what I'm hoping you're asking for is to bring the community into the IETF with the documents, because if you throw them over the wall, the rate of progress will be sort of the continental drift rate and not actual improvement. So I'm hoping that's where this goes.
Right. No, thank you for right. And to clarify, right, this is not, I mean, we're not hoping to hand over, a bunch of files and say, great, now it's the IETF's work. What we would really love to see happen is the development community, and the IETF community, collaborate on this. And I don't think the development community, there would be willing to, to abandon this either. That's not their intention, and that's not our intention. So, but thank you. That's a good question.
So Colin Jennings is an individual contributor. I think there's, as people said, there's lots of needs for lossless codecs on the internet, including, handling medical images, a lot of those types of environments. Also just what your motivating case of the long-term archive, so that we can move it to this constantly changing generations of compression video codecs. So I see that having a standardized open version of that is valuable. In the sort of questions about bringing in stuff that's already largely done, I've reviewed these specs. I think though the algorithms and the code and the bitstream formats are fairly far advanced, I think the specs are not. It would be very difficult to make interoperable implementations from the state of the current specs without looking at the source code. That we can help revolve these steps. That the IETF provides a change control and a good place to make something so that it is a consensus process versus just something less formal. So I can see the value for that. I'd also like to remind people we've had lots of other things, like XMPP comes to mind, or something, of these largely finished protocols that then came to the IETF and then evolved inside of the IETF. And of course, what Ted said being very true, that it wasn't just some protocols got thrown over the wall. It was the people was the important thing, and they were the people doing it. We also have lots of things that are container formats that hold some data that we're standardizing inside of the IETF that we then use inside of our other protocols like HTTP and stuff. JSON being a good example of those, right? It's not that we only do protocols. We often do things that are containers or data holders that get used widely on the internet as well. So, it's a little bit different than some of the stuff we've done before, but I don't see it as a huge leap from where we are. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, looks like.
Steve Botsko, is this close enough to the mic? People complained yesterday. I think it's very interesting. I think the digital archiving is a valuable thing for the planet, not just the internet community. I guess the only concern I would have is actually on the Matroska part of it, and that sounds like it's an ongoing, perhaps never-ending maintenance aspect, since new codecs will always be added. So just that the community here should understand that taking on that is, unless it's limited specifically to FFV1, could be a fairly long-term effort. It wouldn't be just a quick working group that starts up, does its work, and then closes.
Okay. Thank you.
Alyssa Cooper, does your development community meet in person?
I'm sorry?
Does your development community meet in person? No.
No.
Okay. Thanks.
Not that I'm aware of at any rate, but it mostly, again, on the sites, there mostly takes place on those two lists, Matroska-Devel and FFmpeg-Devel.
Okay. It's useful to know because you don't have to meet in person here either.
Right.
So that's why I was just curious.
Great. Thank you. Sure.
So this is from Steve Lum, who is also Robox 4. As the original author of Matroska, I'm already involved with the more formal specifications of EBML and Matroska that started a few months ago and will continue participating wherever it is going to happen. Dave Rice also notes, but did not put a mic in it, so I'm just reflecting on my own volition, some in-person meetings at FOSDEM, but most is virtual. And now again from Steve. How each codec is defined in Matroska is outside of the main specs. It's a top layer, and not all codecs have to be defined formally.
This is Ben Campbell, and I think I see some evidence towards the answer to this question in the amount of activity going on in the Jabber room. But could you say something about what your general level of support in your development community is for bringing this into the IETF?
I think we've discussed and announced with both communities, the idea of and the plan to bring this to the IETF, and we have support from both of the communities.
Going back to what Cullen said earlier, do you think that the community is interested in joining actively in that process?
I think that was one of the questions that will depend on kind of like the outcome from today. Whether we can talk to them as something, hey, people from the IETF are interested in working on this. How do we go about furthering this? I know both communities are interested in having these specifications standardized. So, thank you. Okay.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah. It does sound like there's interest in the room in this topic. The other question would be, of course, that we need people in this room or on the mailing list that are also willing to contribute, right, from the IETF community. So I'd like to ask for people to raise their hand if that's something they would be willing to contribute to this work. Okay, Ted. Ben, kinda. Okay, so I'm only seeing one hand raised, so.
Could you maybe ask about like reviewing versus contributing? Sounds like I need to have
right, but if we don't have anybody that's, we will need somebody from our community to do that as well.
To do what?
To contribute to the work.
What does that mean? Yeah.
It means review it and provide input into it, right? Like we do for all of our documents. We have document editors, and then we have other people that provide input to them. Right.
I guess all I'm saying is that I think people don't necessarily need to be developers of the codecs themselves.
Right. And that was not what I was saying. I was speaking in general in terms of how we do our standards development work here.
Okay. I personally, from my perspective, I would be interested in knowing who would be willing to review the stuff that's coming in versus make their own original contributions to the codex.
That wasn't what I was asking. So.
Well, I would like to ask that.
Okay.
So
go ahead and ask.
Okay. So. Yeah.
Okay. Let me try and paraphrase it. So, who would be willing to help review some of the documents in this space? So I don't know, 8, 10, something like that. 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
A handful or two.
And now from the Jabber room, Matroska actually stands on top of EBML, which can be used for a lot of other storage, just like a binary XML. Also, Dave Rice, discussions on working on FFV1 within the IETF context started in discussions on listservs in 2012. Matroska has an RFC draft from 2004. Ooh. Unfortunately, this work wasn't completed, but there is sincere support to move forward with this now.
See, they're a perfect match with the IETF.
I'm Richard Barnes. I was just going to note that I'm not seeing a lot of the folks who are involved in NetVC and things like that in the room, so they might be likely candidates to raise their hands for things like this. So engaging interest, we should probably go back to the list as well.
Well, sure. I mean, that's the thing. So we'll take this discussion back to the list because we're not ready to say, oh, let's go run and charter this, right? But it sounds like there's interest. We should continue to refine the charter, and we can probably just send an email to the NetVC list or something like that and say, hey, you guys might have an interest in this, because I don't know if they're reading Dispatch at all, any of those guys. So. Okay, yeah. So we'll do that.
All right, great.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you, Tessa. Sean, yeah. Okay, you ready for next?
Okay, I'm ready. Hi, I'm Sean Gillis, and I presented last time remotely about a proposed working group for the GeoJSON format, or if you're from the Pacific Northwest, you can call it GUI-JSON. So this, I'm going to maybe 2 slides on just a review of what the format is, and then I'll go through the charter elements and then dive a little bit deeper and go pretty quickly through the actual specific work that we'd like to do in the working group. So this is it's a modern format for encoding geographic data that it's a JSON format that's also rooted in the Geographic Information Systems domain. So it's been widely picked up and accepted by both the web development community and the GIS community because it appeals to their separate needs. So for a web developer, it's JSON. It's very easy to use. For a GIS operator or database analyst, it has the familiar constructs from spatial databases and previous XML formats. So it's very ready to use for those folks too. Excuse me. Next slide, please. So where we are right now is that GeoJSON is very widely implemented, and it's used in a number of mapping APIs, transit applications, direction finding, data editing applications as well. And because the usage is up, there's a demand now, an increased demand for standardization, improvements in the spec, how to use it in higher data volume situations, and how to extend it. So I guess I would say currently there are some bugs, like some stumbling blocks and some gaps in the specification. And what we don't need is for implementers to go about removing these blocks or filling these gaps in incompatible ways, or coming up with incompatible ways of extending the format, or incompatible ways of handling larger data sets with it, or converting it into binary formats as well. And we feel that I and the other original GeoJSON authors feel that a working group is the best way to get all these implementers to come in. Yes. Yeah, so with the working group, we want to bring the implementers in to work together on compatibility. Still closer. All right. Yeah. Yeah, that might be the best thing to do. All right, so with the working group, we want to bring the implementers in to work on compatibility of the format so that it's not fractured. We don't have the geographic information system space revert to proprietary formats that are glued to specific applications. Next. So in the charter, what we propose to do is to refine and improve the existing format, to describe a streamable sequence of JSON text to handle larger volumes of data, to map GeoURIs into GeoJSON. And the one thing that we're not going to do in the charter is address these GeoPriv issues of location and location object, or whether GeoJSON has to, has to define itself with respect to being location objects or location information. Next slide, please. So for specific refinements we'd like to work on, there's a few more. These are all coming from the issue tracker, so these are ones that we have noted that we would really like to work on quickly. And get help on from the IETF is to provide guidance on coordinate precision, how to interpret undefined heights or elevations in the specification, what to do about geometries near the anti-meridians and the poles, and then timestamps for coordinates. Next slide, Mary. So, for example, in coordinate precision, I mean, as with JSON formats in general are fairly verbose. Excessive precision makes the size of these files go up. People complain and groan about how big their GeoJSON data files is, why they can't make a map of them when they upload them to GitHub, etc. So, for example, there's a widely used piece of software that writes coordinates out with 15 decimal places of precision. And this is for, if you're talking about decimal degrees, this is subatomic precision. So for, let's say you want to make a map of, you're working for a county assessor, or you're working for a city government that has maps of properties. You don't really need subatomic precision for your street center lines, etc., where 6 decimal places will do, and gives you 10 centimeter precision, which is better than you're going to get from, an ordinary GPS. Next slide. So elevation is an optional coordinate value in our data format because GeoJSON is largely concerned with features on the surface. And the interpretation of undefined elevation values is a little bit underspecified. So I think that we might want to follow, in this case, a RFC 5870, which is the GeoURI spec, which lays out pretty clearly the difference between saying that your elevation is 0 and then having an undefined elevation. So undefined elevation there means that the elevation would follow the Earth's surface. So it's kind of the not sea level, not some sort of normalized ground level, but is actually the terrain level. Next slide. Now the anti-meridian problem is if you consider 2 points on either side of the anti-meridian or the date line, it's currently not, GeoJSON is currently ambiguous if you say we have a line segment that has those 2 points as the ends. Are we talking about the short line that crosses the anti-meridian, or are we talking about the long line that goes all the way around the other side of the planet? All right. I think that GeoJSON, as it was originally conceived, was largely focused on relatively small features bounded within a hemisphere, or perhaps within a state or a city. So some issues like this were kind of were missed originally, to engage the community to come back in and fix these technical problems. In addition to that one, there's the issue of geographic features with very long edges. So if we have, once again, let's say you draw a triangle on the surface of the Earth, and it's a large triangle, so covering maybe a large part of a hemisphere. Do we mean that the lines between, do we mean the edges of the triangle are segments along a great circle, or do we mean that they're more like the, more naive kind of Cartesian drawing of the line from point to point? So that needs to be nailed down a little more too. With timestamps, so over time, right now the GeoJSON is using the WGS84, the World Geodetic System standard for coordinates. Over time, this drifts with respect to other coordinate reference systems. And then without recording the timestamps, isn't useful for anything except real-time applications. So without timestamps, we can't archive it. You can't go back and say, well, this is what this data meant. This is how we transform it to, say, British National Grid or something like that. So we need to have the timestamps there. And there's guidance in this other RFC already about location timestamps for measurements. Next. Now, GIS data sets can be typically very large, so kind of log file sized, millions of records or more, and serializations of these is problematic. So we'd like to explore and document ways to use JSON text sequences, kind of a fairly new RFC, to deal with these kind of data sets. One problem with them is, I would say, unlike log files where a line is a line and maybe doesn't have much more context other than where you're storing it on the file system, permissions, etc. We need a way to convey other properties of the collection of features that these things are in. So I think there'll be some sort of, we'll need to have some extension of the feature sequences. Next. And finally, extensibility. Right now, the authors of the GeoJSON spec would like to keep it a fairly small specification that's just a few pages, fairly easy to understand, not filled with a lot of extensions of itself. So we're kind of leaving it up to other implementers to come up with extensions. And right now, people try it, and they naturally do it in some different ways that have some conflicts between them. And we'd like to provide guidance on how implementers can work together to come up with compatible extensions so that they could do a few of the different extensions mentioned here, or perhaps even mix them together. So geocoding is the process of asking a system, giving an address to come out with a point that you can put on a map. And maybe you'd like to have that point have some styling information for your map as well. So you might like to mix extensions, and at the moment, in the field, I don't like where this is going. People are going in different directions and not talking to each other about this. So we would like to fix that. GeoPriv. So we've come to the conclusion that GeoJSON does not fall under the definitions of location information or location objects. Working with GeoPriv, as much as we're interested in privacy, and I think I would like to see the format be an ally of people with privacy concerns. I don't think we're going to work on GeoPriv stuff in this working group. Next. The other groups that we're going to work along with include the W3C and the OGC, which also do spatial. There's a spatial data on the web working group, and they've mentioned that they would like to use GeoJSON in their documents and reference it, and they would love to see it become an actual standard and not do the standards work themselves. The OData specification is using GeoJSON, so OASIS has an interest in this. And then being a JSON specification or a JSON-based specification, I think ECMA also has an interest. And the proposed charter is here on GitHub, and the draft that we've been working on over the past year or so is listed here as well. Thank you.
Step up the microphone. Oh. Robert.
So if you could back up to the
Sure.
slide on GeoPriv, who did the analysis on whether this doesn't meet the definition of a location object in particular? I mean, did that conversation happen somewhere on a list?
On the dispatch list.
Okay.
And then also dispatch list, my interpretation as well. I must confess that I think the original GeoJSON authors are very, I shouldn't say a little bit ignorant. They're completely ignorant of the GeoPriv work. I mean, they're not IETF members, and they're coming from the OGC, and then I haven't seen a whole lot of GeoPriv discussion there. There's a bit.
A lot of whether or not it's going to meet the definitions in those RFCs that you point to depends on where you use it. Mm-hmm. And you take one of these objects as you've got, as we've seen them specified so far, and you use them in certain contexts, and they are very definitely going to be location objects. So
within a particular.
Can we have some GeoPriv chairs at the microphone, please?
Well, but I have another point. I think you will want the other point before you respond. So back up a slide. So a lot of the things that we do with PITIS and PITIS lows are taking a representation of geographic information and then attaching other information like policy rules to it. A decent extensibility point in a format that allows you to talk about geolocation that would allow things like policy information to be associated with it in a well-packaged, well-understood format would make it fairly easy to map all of the GeoPriv concepts into a representation that was in this format.
So I looked at the spec, and then I looked at what we did for GeoURI. And essentially what we said with GeoURI was that what you can do with this specification is write down a location. You cannot write down a location of something. You can't write down a location of a device or a target, right? You have to have some other protocol in order to be able to do that, right? And to me, this, not getting into the extensibility point because that might change the analysis, but before that, this seemed very similar, right? Like what you can do is say like, this is the point. And if you're going to say something lives at this point, then you need some other protocol, and that is when you would take the GeoJSON object, and when it became incorporated into this other protocol, it would become a location object. I'm perfectly willing to have a debate about whether that is a sound analysis, but that was just, in the wee hours before this meeting, that was how it looked to me. So now, if you start talking about some of what you have on the slide there, that could change, I think. But.
Yeah. Richard Barnes. I'm in largely. Can we have one? Largely the same place Alyssa is here. I had done sort of a similar analysis, and also looking at RFC 3693. There has been, in that document even, there is a distinction between location information and a location object. Location information being a description of a precise way of saying where something is, and a location object being how that is used in some context where other stuff is attached to it. And it's even going back to RFC 3693, the privacy stuff and all of the GeoPriv considerations apply to these location objects, where location is used in some context and where it's associated with other stuff. And so I think this stuff is a layer down from the whole GeoPriv architecture, much like the GeoURI is.
I guess the last point that I'd like to throw in on that is that a lot of the reasons that we chose not to ask the GeoURI to be able to encode some of the things the location object was that it was just not feasible to do so. And there was a lot of rationalization that took place, when we came to that realization. And in this particular case, I don't see that constraint exists at all. It would be feasible to do all kinds of encoding. And I think that the takeaway from here is that there is probably an interesting technical conversation to have about if you were building a location object, would it use one of these things, or would you make one of these things carry a location object?
Okay, no one else has comments. Okay, so Sean is here because he did the presentation remotely last time, and there was interest in the room last time of working in this space. You going to say something, Richard? So what are you going to have a comment on? Go ahead. So, Roger, yeah.
Roger Marshall, TTS. While I'm not sure if the question is, does this fit or not in GeoPriv, I don't really care about that, but I do support the work. I think it's very important. So.
To be clear, GeoPriv is closed, so it's not like does it fit within GeoPriv. It's like is it consistent, and are we going to use the same sort of architecture that was designed previously or not? That's more of where the debate is.
No. The idea with this is a fairly discrete work item that we could charter a working group to go work on that. Obviously, there's been a lot of discussion in GeoPriv, and more work can happen in that analysis and such, right? Within a working group, right? We're not going to just, say that's done now, and we're.
Yeah, Roger Marshall. Can you help clarify from my understanding? In GeoPriv, we're talking about a PID of flow location object that it deals with discrete location information, whereas this seems like GeoJSON talks about data layers, mass quantities, one to n number of segments or points, features, and shoving that stuff around. Is that more or less characterizing it?
Yes, I think that's fair to say. I mean, although certainly people do use GeoJSON in kind of single feature roles or single location applications. But yeah, largely it's about talking about ensembles of features that kind of, that give context to each other. I think that's what we would call in GIS a layer, things that by being collected together provide extra context and somehow model an entirety of a concept. So GeoJSON does kind of carry those concepts with it. But perhaps I being new to GeoPriv, but I came away with a conclusion from reading the architecture that a lot of the GeoJSON, as people use it today, is at least in the way GIS people use it, is largely downstream of how, of downstream of the uses that motivated GeoPriv. Although, certainly privacy is as important to aggregate information as it is to, individual locations.
Henning Schulz-Sonny. We seem to be talking about three different things that we talk about mapping information that you've alluded to and Roger, did as well. Namely, one is what laymen probably would call a map, namely something relatively static, lots of objects describing some geographic area. You could do that in GeoJSON, it sounds like. You could essentially take Google Maps of Prague and render that in GeoJSON. What is that? You tell me because I don't. Yeah, it's descriptive largely.
Yes.
And then we, in a variety of places, EQUIT, GeoPriv type of territory, but others as well, have developed things which aren't quite layers, but are really more constrained object, like say boundary of a PSAP, which could be, you can consider that in lost or the uncertainty area of an object type of thing, that type of thing. And when you called it downstream, but it's a different, you could treat it as a GIS layer if you wanted to, but you don't because it's really not part of a GIS system at that point anymore. Maybe you render it there, but it's really not meant for that. And the third one is, and I think we talked about that earlier, is that it's really a real, like you said earlier, a real-time description of something else. And that it happens to have geographic properties. It's more or less seen as a generalization of a point. Where in many cases we think of the trivial case as a point, but maybe that's not a good enough description for that real-time thing, a person, an object, and whatever. So it's really attached either explicitly, namely integrated, or implicitly by being carried along with a presence protocol or an email message or something else that it implicitly says, because it's a header in an email message that points to that, the semantics is this happens to be the current location of the email sender, even though geozation says nothing about email, has no email address in it, and otherwise if you removed from that context, you had no idea what it was. Is that a fair characterization of kind of what, in the IETF context at least, since we're not a GIS organization, we would see where geozation might find itself?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say, yes.
Richard Burns again. This is sort of precisely what I meant when I said this is a layer down from GeoPriv and what it thinks about it. When you read RFC 3693 and the updates that have been done and talk about GeoPriv architecture, they're focused on the usage of location in describing a device, the location of a thing whose privacy you're interested in preserving. Now, GeoJSON can be used for describing the location of a thing. But as we've been discussing for the last few minutes, it also has a much broader set of use cases for describing where lots of things are, where, how a whole city is laid out, which have very different, do have privacy considerations, as you pointed out, have security considerations, but they're very different from what GeoPriv points out. I think this discussion of the generality of GeoJSON makes the same point, that it makes, when we're looking at the privacy considerations that attach, yes, in some situations the GeoPriv privacy considerations will be important to consider, but they're in specific usages of this stuff and don't need to be handled at the layer of figuring out what the format is.
Okay, well, and I'm going to ask a very concrete question, and maybe this will make it easier for people to understand. So who in the room, if we decide to charter this, would sign up for the mailing list, read the documents, provide feedback on the open issues and such? Okay. Well, you'll provide comments. Yeah, Alyssa?
I would just say, again, there might be a bunch of folks who would be interested in this who aren't in this room right now.
Correct.
So,
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a few people in this room. So, yeah. So we can go ahead and confirm that. We'll put it on dispatch, and then GeoPriv is still open, but the list is there, right? And so I'll go ahead and post it there as well, just in case people aren't paying attention over here, which, yeah, we don't have a very full room. So, okay. And then the charter text is out there, and we can fine tune the wording around the GeoPriv. There is a big paragraph in there on that, so we can fine tune that. What, Jonathan? I can't hear you back there.
I was just saying, I'm glad we don't have to decide whether this should go in apps or RAI.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, John.
Thank you very much.
Andrew?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. It's Andrew. Sorry. Yes, it's you. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I'm doing it right now.
Hi. Okay, so I'm Andy Hutton. I'm effectively proxying for James Winterbottom. So if you know James, this is obviously coming from the emergency services community. It's a very short draft. We're looking for a home for it. Basically, it adds a parameter to the location. Okay, I thought something was missing there. Okay, yeah. So as I say, this comes from the emergency service community. It's a very short draft. We're looking for a home for it. What this draft does is basically add a parameter. There is something missing from the first line there. I was just reading it. Anyway.
I didn't remove anything.
It's not like that, the hook that I sent you. Anyway, okay. It adds a parameter to the geolocation, SIP geolocation header, which is defined in RFC 6442. The purpose of it is to indicate, which node added that location value. which might be controversial in some cases, which restricts the use of it, obviously, but yeah. This assumes the possibility that there are multiple location values being added to the header field, which is allowed by the current RFC, but not recommended. But commonly, in the sort of emergency calling scenarios, we expect multiple locations to be used. For instance, device location and then some sort of network node added location value as well. Currently, the order indicates order of values in the geolocation header does actually indicate, in what order they were added, but more information about actually, which node added it would be whether it was a used device or an enterprise, or whether it was a border node to a mobile network or whatever, would be useful information to the emergency services. And as we say, it allows the emergency call taker, or any call taker, I guess, who has this information to make some informed decisions about which values are more trustworthy or whatever. Okay. Obviously, there are some issues with this. It's probably not generally applicable or a good idea to add this information in middle boxes. So it does require a strict trust domain, and the draft says that only entities within that trust domain should be adding this parameter, and if entities outside of a trust domain that receives such a thing should probably throw it away. I think the draft says that. So there are obviously some security concerns and issues to be ironed out or specified there. I think the community probably the community requesting this probably talked about some cryptographic ways of maybe doing this, but it's all too hard probably, and probably not necessary in the scenarios where they require it. So, who really wants this? This comes actually from the IETF93 work. So if you don't know that, IETF93 is actually the result of a European Commission mandate for European standards on providing location for emergency calling over VoIP networks in Europe. And IETF are currently at the stage of their stage 3 work, which is developing the detailed protocol, and obviously they've identified the need for this extra parameter. So the problem is we've written this draft and we need to find a location to do it. A working group. So that concludes my presentation, really. Questions, right, yeah, etc.
So Colin James, I just want to comment as an individual on the trust domain type stuff. So 3325, I was one of the co-authors of that, and we defined the spec T that was absolutely required. To my knowledge, no one deploying that has ever done that absolutely required thing. I have yet to see a spec T document delivered ever. So I think this concept of that is, and don't worry here, I'm going to get to a point of suggesting maybe you don't need it, but I think it's completely and totally flawed as a privacy mechanism. It's never worked. Now, that said, when we're talking about emergency calling, as long as it's clear that somebody originated an emergency call, I'd be perfectly happy with saying all privacy bets are off. Please put my location in and deliver it to whoever's willing to listen. But I mean, that's effectively what it would mean. So I just want to point out that I don't think the trust domain model has worked. Okay. That said, I don't know that you need it.
Understood. Okay.
Roland Jeske, Deutsche Telekom. I can say the trust domain model works within our domain. So we have deployed a network where the trust domain is used. So with regard to that, we are also requiring such kind of, let's say, indication where this geolocation is added, or this location is added, where the emergency call comes from and which entity has it added. And for us, it's important because we need to satisfy regulation requirements, and that's very important for us. Thank you.
understood. So it definitely comes from some regulatory type requirements here.
Okay. So the question is this a thing that people generally would like to work on, or is this something that people think is very specific to M493, such that we could, like, AD sponsor? Alyssa, you gonna make a comment? Well, the question is, normally they would have taken this to GeoPriv working group, right? And discussed
probably.
it, right? Or is it something? Well,
I know. I was kind of wondering if you could do it in ECRID.
It's emergency service specific, yeah.
I mean,
isn't it?
I know that you want to have general
really
applicability.
Specific to emergency. I mean, yes, the use case is, but whether
right. So right, which is my question: is there another general use for this, or?
Just a clarifying question: will this ever be added by in a situation that is not an emergency call?
I mean, that people could obviously probably use it once it's defined. So, I mean, the use case that where this comes from, it is only emergency calling. I mean, but yeah, anybody could use it.
Sorry, from the Jabber chat room. Mic check. Oh, sorry. Why doesn't the URL of the LIS tell you the source of the location data anyway? That was from john-itf@jabber.org.
Well, this could be it's not necessarily a URL anyway. It could be a PDF flow or whatever, but yeah. I'm not sure that's true anyway, but.
So I think the thing is that if you want this to be used outside of the emergency context, then I think that some of what Cullen said gets negated about the trust model, right? So, you know, you don't get the pass anymore on this is an emergency, so we don't care what we send. That goes away.
I mean, I'm not aware of the only use case that I'm aware of is the emergency services case, but yeah.
Okay.
Is that true?
Okay. So how many people in the room have actually read this document? Okay. So we have a handful, which is pretty good for this group. Okay. And there's people. Yeah. So I mean, this is the big debate, right? Are we going to make it specific to emergency services, or is it something that could be general purpose? Someone mentioned the fact that if we define this, we're not protocol police, right? And someone could use it outside the context of emergency services, and but we would have to add all the wording about the risk of doing that and such, right?
I mean, yeah, the security consideration stuff obviously needs to be fairly robust here, yeah. But we can only make recommendations.
Yeah, this has been. Although I agree with what you said at the very end about we would need to make sure we say these things in the output, I don't think we have to worry too much about what someone else might do with it that we've already told them not to do. If this is the use case we have in mind, let's worry about the use cases we have in mind.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe we could ask the authors to take this discussion under advisement and spin a rev that is more clear about what they think they're doing.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
Is that?
I
mean, James said it's a straw man anyway. So.
Right. But no one is vehemently objecting to doing something around this document, right? So yeah. Okay. Thanks, Andrew. Okay. Yeah. Now you're up, Krista. All right. Yeah. It takes me. It's not instantaneous to go into the next presentation. Okay.
Okay, so the following thing is about defining a very simple information element, which is needed by 3GPP. So I guess this is something which is, at least so far, has only been of interest for the 3GPP community. So basically what this is all about is that when you have different networks, you can have a transit networks, where traffic, or when you establish traffic, the invites or whatever request goes through, and this can be a transit network between two operators networks, or it can be a transit network which is between two networks belonging to the same operator. For example, if you have, those kind of scenarios. The thing here, what can happen is that this transit network may apply some services or maybe some policies or whatever on this request based on from which network it comes. And this is not necessarily the original network or the original user, because the original user, that information you could get from elsewhere. And normally transit networks, they don't do user-based services or features. They don't know anything about the users, and they don't have access to the user database. So this is more just from which network, the adjacent network where it comes from. So next, please. So basically, this draft or this proposal has been around for a while. I originally submitted this to ZipCore. Then it was rather quiet. I didn't have really cycles for it myself due to bundle and other stuff. But anyway, now it was brought up again, and it was decided to bring it here to dispatch. What it's about is just defining a new via header field parameter. So basically, when a request comes into these transit networks, you normally have an entry point, zip proxy or something else, that knows where it comes from. And the only thing it would do is it will insert this parameter. So any upstream nodes within that network, for example, within the transit network, is an application server. It knows, okay, this is where it came from. So now I could do something if I want to. And something which is very important to point out here is that this is just an information element. There's no do what I say, do what I mean semantics to this. It's only I insert this information, and then someone within the network can choose to use that for whatever they want. 3GPP doesn't specify any procedures either what you should do with this. It's operator and implementation specific. Now, one comment which was given by Adam was that, if you go back, is that when it does insert this value, it would also be useful, for example, to calculate an HMAC value of it, to make sure, that this is correct value. And the key to do that would only be obviously known to this network. It's also important to know, as I said, this value itself is only used within that network. So the operator knows the key, what to use to calculate this, and then it can assert it. And obviously, if there's something wrong when an application server, someone gets it and wants to use it, then it shouldn't use it. And again, it's informational. This is not supposed to impact ZipCore routing procedures or anything. And did I misunderstand your suggestion?
Oh no, it's good. This is Adam Roach at the microphone. I just wanted to point out that was it was almost an off-the-cuff sort of thing. I'm not in love with this as design. My overarching concern was that we were putting in a value that appeared to impact processing in some way, but wasn't authenticated. So this is kind of like the simplest thing you could do for authentication. If we'd come up with something better than this, I think I'd be happier. But this at least passes the threshold of being not just a bare unauthenticated assertion.
I mean, I liked your ideas, and I think it's a simple idea. But obviously, if someone has something else, you're free. I think this is an easy and thing to do.
But we're not trying to solve it now. I'm just saying that probably something better than this if we actually go forward and do the work.
Next slide, please. And this is just showing an example. You have network Y, and then it comes into network X. You have this entry point, for example, zip proxy, and it adds this value to the via header. And then, you have an application server or something else which uses it. So that's it. Next one, please. There were some questions previously when we had this in ZipCore. So why don't you just look at this previous via headers, for example, and look what's in there, and you determine, where this comes from. Now, for example, you cannot always rely on that. For example, if you have private networks and you have private IP addresses in the via headers, that doesn't work. And also, if you have traversed a lot of SIP entities and you have a number of via headers, it takes time then to go through all of these and try to figure out, okay, which one belongs to my own network, because obviously before this comes to the application server, it may also traverse, nodes within your own network, and you don't care about those. You have to go through, and that takes some processing. So this is just basically making it easier by inserting this information.
They may also have been, Andrew Allen, they may also have been tokenized by an SBC, so you didn't know where they were.
Yeah. So that's trying to answer that question. And basically the suggestion here is that, again, this is a simple thing to do. My personal suggestion would be that they should be AD sponsored. Most of the interest, even though, there has been comments from people like Adam and Paul Kusivat earlier, but basically the support for this has come mainly from the 3BB community. So, and again, it's an information element even simpler than the IOTL we did a while ago. So, but if I'm open to whatever.
Can you or Ben or something say a little bit about how it, why did it come out of SIPCore? It was in SIPCore, but then now out, or I'm just lost on
Well, maybe I thought, this is a new parameter for a SIP header field. So maybe but like I said, when I submitted this originally, it's a while ago. So
Adam Roach in the role of SIPCore chair here. So our charter is actually fairly narrow in what we take on, and it's pretty clear that things like this that would just be implemented in like certain realms, things that aren't like core changes that every implementation is going to have to take note of, aren't things that we take on. Now, if we want to have a broader conversation around whether SIPCore should expand beyond that, I'm game, but if the reason it popped out is because it's out of charter. We would need to recharter. So
out of charter. That makes sense. Got it.
That's all the slides I had. So
we're waiting. The AV is conferring with the chair. So okay.
So this has been normally I would say, yeah, this should be AD sponsored. Adam's comment a minute ago about wanting to look more closely at the authentication makes it a little harder for me to say AD sponsored this. If it needs work from more than just the authors, then unless we can find some way to make that work happen, that doesn't mean putting it in SIPCore or some other group.
Well, we've taken into consideration input from other people for other AD sponsored documents.
Certainly, if the input happens.
If what now? If the input happens. Oh, yes.
For example,
right.
Paul Kusivat had a lot of input on the IOTL, even though it was AD sponsored. So, but I'm not religious about that. I don't think we need to create a new working group for this. But if we can find a home somewhere else, I have no problem with that. Yeah. But whatever you and
I guess my point is we need to do whatever we need to do to make sure that input happens around the authentication question.
So I see your point. Your point is we need somebody that understands that security well enough that we can make sure that the integrity of that section of the document. Yeah.
And Adam Roach, I think that if we just had one really good security guy look at this and say, this is the property that we really want, and come up with something that provides it, that's probably enough. I don't think we need necessarily to have a committee work on that.
Right.
Sure. So why don't we get our usual SIPs or RISE art, I guess now, but the RISE security advisor to see if they'll review it, and then that would give input to the AD sponsor perhaps, and would the right mailing list for this be maybe SIPCore?
I wouldn't object to that.
I don't have a better plan than that. Does that sound like a workable plan to folks?
We could put together, I was about to say, we could put together a non-working group mailing list, but we're putting together like all of the machinery of a working group except for a charter at that point, so.
Yeah.
I could just a short comment. One thing we did in the Strobe working group, for example, because we had a document where there were some security aspects, and Stephen Farrell had a lot of comments on that, and we updated the documents and then we kept it offline. We sent it to him offline and asked, could you please take a look at this, and so on and so on. I guess something similar could be done here.
So Barry whispered in my ear something I'll bring to the mic. So to make all this happen, we just need a good shepherd.
Right. So okay, there we go. Okay. Well,
send me an email, Christopher.
Yeah. Adam will shepherd the document. We're good. Okay.
Can we put that into the minutes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I think we're done.
But are we going to make a decision on how to move forward? Is it going to be AD sponsored, or is it going to be?
Well, I think you wanted that discussion to happen first with the security, and then he'll make the decision.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Krister. Right. One of the art area directors will provide that guidance. Okay. Who's up next? So it's dark because I'm switching presentations, not because I screwed something up. Okay. Randall. Do we have Mr. Gellens here? Oh, here he is. Okay. Oops, I don't know why I keep doing that. Okay. Do you want to come up front, or you want to? It's up to you. Yeah, in the pink box, yeah. Because that way you'll be on film and everything, yeah.
Hi, everybody. I'm Randall Gellens. This is, we're talking about the proposed SLIM working group, because everybody wants to be slim. So anyway, this working group, go to the next slide. Right, so the working group actually is trying to target the general problem of getting the human language right if for two very different problem sets. One is email, non-real time, and the other is real time, specifically, or in the first case, SIP SDP. So for the real time language negotiation, for the folks in this room are most interested in, what we want to do is we want to match what the language and media needs of a caller are with what the capabilities of the called party are. And this is targeted for cases where you don't have the usual kinds of context that you would have if somebody's calling a friend. This is for the case where a user's calling a call center. That's the general canonical example. And emergency calls are one specific case of the example. So let's see, right. So actually just want to mention one other point from the other slide, which is that the call center will typically have some set of capabilities for both language and media, and it can meet those capabilities through a combination of in-house staff and in-house facilities and external facilities such as relays or translation services or interpretation services. Okay, next slide. So what we really want to do now is have the working group advance two specific documents, one for the email case and the other for the real-time case. Those are the two drafts there. And what we've would like to do, based on some discussions that we've had up to now, is punt on the routing for now. So we want to get a useful ability to negotiate a language for each media stream and get that done first, and then we'll start considering what we need to do for routing. I think there's another slide. Okay, you can show the charter if you want.
I don't have it handy.
Oh, okay.
Do you have a link to it?
I attached it along with the slides, but.
Well, there's also, you can get it out of the data tracker. Well, yeah, I know, but it's.
Anyway, everyone's welcome to go look at the charter. It's in the data tracker.
Well, I can pull it up. Hang on a second. Let me go search for it. Just a second. I don't.
Pretty blue.
Oh. Okay. Hang on a second.
I could read it out to everyone. It's about 3 pages long. I'm sure we.
I'm almost there.
It is long though, so bring it up on your notebook computer if you have one in front of you.
It is long. Holy moly. Okay. So is there anything in particular, Randy, you wanted to point out on this, or?
So the first paragraph sets out the why this is needed. Second paragraph just says that there's going to be two different problem sets to be solved initially: email and real-time communication. Then, right, so in the real-time case, we do want to get the point across that language and media are linked together because, for example, you can't do sign language unless you have video. And then in the email case, we're going to do MIME, and then if you go down... Sorry. Well, I mean, the point is, I think we're almost done here, so... I mean, this group probably doesn't care about the email, so if you want to scroll down. Yeah, okay.
I actually think the paragraph about why one working group is important.
All right. That's right here. So this paragraph points out that the two use cases are different, but what it doesn't say is that they're two very small areas, so one working group would probably do it, plus there are people who have expertise in both and people are interested in both. We also want to make sure that we take advantage of whatever commonalities are possible. At a minimum, that will be the fact that we're going to use the IANA language tags registry. And so now, in the real-time case here, what we're targeting to do is enable negotiation of a human language per media stream. It has to be suitable for use in emergency communications, but we also want it to be usable in the general calling center case. And it does talk about how we have in the past explored media negotiation in SIP. People may recall this work has been underway for several years now, and we have gone back and forth a few times and had versions of the draft that proposed using entirely SIP mechanisms as well as SDP mechanisms. But in this next paragraph down here, the group will not focus on call routing. This is something that happened as a result of discussions at this IETF as a way to move forward, because the routing seems to be one of the more contentious aspects of the problem, and the negotiation of a language per media stream is definitely needed. It's something fairly simple, so we want to get that done first and then start looking at routing.
Okay, and so this was, Bernard saw this, and Bernard is okay. This helped resolve that concern he had raised around the charter then.
Well, Bernard...
I'm asking.
I don't want to speak for Bernard.
Well, I know, because I think that was the whole reason why we were back here discussing this charter, was because of the issue that Bernard had raised on the list.
Right, and this did come up at the crit session where Bernard was there, and then we reaffirmed it at the luncheon yesterday where Bernard said he was going to be there but wasn't.
He wasn't even at the lunch yesterday?
No.
Oh, so he has not seen this probably then.
Well, he's on the email.
Right, but so
does anyone else share Bernard's concern?
So I think Bernard and I Henning Schutz. Bernard and I think shared at least somewhat overlapping concerns. Okay. And I think this, after the lunch discussion and the modification, addresses at least my concerns. My only kind of usual thing is that we're sufficient, again, given that this is going to be a small scale working group in terms of if routing work is available, if somebody actually does the drafting, I would assume that chairs, time permitting, would allow discussion on it when ready in that, so that we can make expeditious progress, particularly because then we can kind of, the one concern that was expressed, I think, at the lunch, which because of the timing, is it probably helps if we at least have a rough notion of a big picture, because then we can say we really don't have to worry about that in the media description, since it looks like the routing piece will take care of that particular use case for us, and we will just punt to that. So we take charters not as, in a good working group, not as clubs to basically beat down people, or good work or relevant work.
Let me just say,
so I'm not concerned.
That's why the wording says that the group will not focus on call routing. It doesn't say call routing is entirely out of scope.
Very well finessed. Thank you.
Right, but the focus is on getting the simple thing, the media negotiation done first.
Krista Holm, my issues previously when this was discussed was more that there was a suggestion for a new attribute, but I don't think this charter talks about that. I mean, so the charter as such is okay. I have no problem also leaving the call routing, but if you say it like this, will not focus on call routing. Basically, I mean, at some point, the decision has to be made whether the information is usable for call routing also or not, because that will have an impact on the mechanism we use. And one thing I talked with you this morning also, one thing that it doesn't necessarily need to be in a charter, but some that we need to focus on is that if we, for example, assume SIP entities that do not understand this information, whether they are going to do specific routing, because then we have caller prefs and so on. But if that's outside of scope, then we don't need to focus on that. But those kind of things need to be when we start doing the actual work.
Barry Lieba, to respond to that last bit, the intent here is that the chairs would allow enough discussion of the routing issues to make sure that what we do in the labeling part will let us move ahead to the routing properly. It's going to be, the idea here is to leave it to chair judgment and to allow the chairs some flexibility. If you think that more text or different text is needed here, propose text, and that'd be great.
Christian, no, I'm fine with having that discussion, but I mean, we need to be clear then that if someone brings a solution that supports routing also, then you can't say, well, the routing is outside the side of the charter. So that means that we need to, at some point, I say we need to decide at some point, not in the charter, but when the work starts, whether we're gonna take routing, or whether we're gonna do something that works for routing or not.
So
I'm not saying we need to do that now. I'm just saying that the way the charter is written now is that
right.
We need to make that decision then later on.
Right. So what you're saying is, if you bring a draft later dealing with routing, you don't want to be told to go away because of the charter.
Right, and that's certainly the intent.
So I don't think the charter says go away on that, right? It says they'll not focus on it.
Right.
And it actually, and it's got forward-looking language here to say, yeah, we may focus on this in the future. So I think the only reason it's up to the chairs, but the only reason I think the chairs would say go away would be we're not ready to talk about it yet. But I don't think the chairs could look at this and say, we can't talk about it because the charter says we can't talk about it.
Right. I mean, I think you could probably change that text a little bit to capture that better, but that's. Yeah.
I apologize. A late Jabber.
Okay, so Ted has.
Paul Kizivat from the Jabber room. My apologies for the delay, Paul. Is there any doubt that, lacking anything else, the labeling will be used for routing?
Oh. I thought that was a rhetorical question.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, after some side conversation, my intent doesn't always deliver, is I'm going to submit a draft which essentially tries to leverage my painful experience in caller preferences to see if we can do something which is more usable for the common cases that we talked about, for call routing specifically. And I think Brian and I worked out a kind of hallway solution that needs to be firmed up, but that's certainly my intent. But there's no draft, so there's nothing to put in there, unlike the other two things, which at least have some meat that one can look at, or that one can digest. And so until somebody puts forth some text that actually spells out how that might look like, I mean, I don't see it's appropriate to speculate much.
So just in conclusion, sorry, go ahead, Barry. Well, I mean, what I'm hearing so far is that many people think it's inevitable routing will probably end up in this working group in one form or another, but we're fine with the charter as is. Is that, if you disagree with that, leap to the mic.
Oh, that's what I was, yeah. This is Barry and Ben, kind of. Mary said something about the rechartering and the routing stuff, whatever. I don't remember exactly what Mary said, but that maybe we could tweak the wording. And all I'll say about that is if anybody has some alternative wording they want to propose, we should get specific wording suggestions right now. Otherwise, I think we have a pretty solid charter.
If you ask me, the wording here pretty much says exactly what people wanted to say, which is that routing will not be the focus of the group, but if you bring it in, there's nothing prohibiting you from the group from discussing it, and that there's a strong possibility that we will recharter to focus on routing.
So this is Ben. I was going to comment that since more and more I'm hearing this room, people expect to work on routing at some point, just not initially. I'm wondering if we ought to remove the bit about the group may recharter and just say the group will not initially focus on routing, but is likely to later, and not actually require a rechartering effort to get to that.
Rechartering is not a terribly expensive process, but
well, this would just leave it to the chairs if we didn't require. Right now, the way the wording is in there, it's going to trigger a recharter when we're ready to seriously work on that, and I'm not sure we need that.
And Barry agrees with that.
Okay, so where do you guys want discussion of this charter to happen? On dispatch or on the SLIM mailing list?
I think the SLIM mailing list is where it belongs. We're here because we expected to get the right people in the room to discuss the issues we need to discuss.
I just wanted to be clear on that, though, right? So if people in this room that aren't on the SLIM mailing list and are interested in this, you should probably join that list. Yeah. Okay. And we are now done then. That was our last agenda item because we iced early. Does anybody have any other comments, any other business they want to talk about? Okay. Thanks. Where are the blue sheets? Did everybody get a chance to sign them? I guess they're hanging out in the back somewhere. Ted, are you channeling somebody?
I'm not channeling somebody. Since the meeting was over, I was just going to mention to folks who might be interested that there is a quick barb off tonight at 8:20 in Congress Hall 1 to talk about the protocol. If you don't know anything about quick and are interested, please stop by.
Oh, the quick protocol.
Quick. No, but there will be snacks, etc., to help you while the time away.
Oh, what was the location for that, Ted? The barb off? Congress Hall 1. Okay. Quick barb off tonight. Oh, yeah.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Well, no, but I